So, hi, it's Nikki again from Happy Hormones for Life, and today's guest is the fabulous Jo Moseley. I recently met Jo and learned about her amazing feat of endurance and bravery of paddling, stand-up paddleboarding from Liverpool to Goole across the country, 162 miles. And you did this a couple of years ago, didn't you, Jo? Amazing, amazing, inspiring story. So I wanted to get Jo on today to really share her story and really give you some inspiration, because this is a 57-year-old post-menopausal woman who is really shaking up the rest of her life ahead of her. So welcome, Jo.
Thank you so much. That's really kind. Yeah.
I was really excited to meet you, first of all, but also to hear your story. And I've subsequently watched your film as well, which is just amazing. So tell everybody really how this came about. What was your life before and what happened, basically?
Yeah. So there's a sort of time in my life that we call the chocolate biscuit moment, when I burst into tears in Tesco supermarket. I was 48, so 9 years ago, and I was just overwhelmed. And I think a lot of your listeners will understand and feel this. I still am a single mum. My boys were teenagers. Both my parents were going through chemotherapy. My dad's had breast bowel and skin cancer. My mum was being treated for lymphoma. And one day in Tesco supermarket, we were just at that witching hour after school and work where everybody's hungry and we just want to get home. And I just dropped my bags in the biscuit aisle, leaned against the chocolate, looked at the chocolate hobnobs and burst into tears and said to my sons, who were like 13 and 16 at the time, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. And I guess this was life. I just couldn't do the life we had. And it wasn't that the life, obviously there were stresses, mum and dad's chemo, of being a single mum, but there was just this underlying feeling of overwhelm. And I didn't realize that the symptoms I was experiencing was the perimenopause, because 9 years ago, it was, people say it's a taboo now, but 9 years ago, there were a handful of people that I could relate to on social media talking about it. And so I was just overwhelmed. I was not sleeping. I was anxious. I could burst into tears at any point. I had itchy legs, tinnitus, all my joints ached, heart palpitations, night sweats, cold flushes, headaches. And I just thought I was stressed. I did not realize it was the perimenopause. And that was just the start. I had cried in many supermarkets, but at that point, it was like that sort of rock bottom where I thought I need to do something about this, although I didn't know what this was. I told a friend, she recommended a bit of exercise. And within a couple of weeks of using her indoor rowing machine, I was sleeping. And then that was the starting point of thinking, okay, I need to look after myself. And then gradually over the next 2 to 3 years, I think it took me to realize I was going through the perimenopause, like literally piecing it together backwards, because I had no idea these symptoms were in any way related. So that's.
And what happened? What help did you get? I know you started with the rowing and that helped quite a bit, didn't it, as a first step?
Yeah, it did. So the rowing helped me sleep. And then I started to think of other little ways I could look after myself, still thinking it was all, I just needed to put some self-care into practice. Because, we didn't grow up with the idea of self-care. That was just not in our vocabulary. And so I started to think about my sleep, to think about my nutrition. Was there things that I just didn't sit right when I went to bed, that sort of gurgled in my tummy, all that sort of thing. And then I realized that I was going through the perimenopause. I think every woman should choose what she needs, whether that's HRT, and get the right support for her. I was in a position that because my dad had breast cancer, and because I'd heard all those reports in the past about it, about HRT and the link with breast cancer, I assumed, I now understand wrongly, that I wouldn't be able to take it. It was a complete assumption on my part. There was absolutely, nobody telling me that. And we were going through tests anyway to see if, what my risk of breast cancer was. So I just automatically assumed wrongly I couldn't take HRT. And so I started to look at other ways I could look after myself. And so exercise and self-care became my way of getting through it. in hindsight, would I have done it differently? Yeah, maybe, definitely. But that's just the route I took based on my incorrect assumptions. I'll hold my hands up about that.
Yeah, and maybe if you had gone down that route, it wouldn't have come out the way it came out. So you may not have ended up doing what you did. So I'm fascinated to know what happened next. So after the sort of initial kind of self-care and realizing that you needed to look after yourself, what happened next? I think you went and tried paddleboarding, didn't you?
Yeah. So in between, my mum died, her lymphoma returned, and then I did this huge fundraising challenge for Macmillan Cancer on the rowing machine. And I think what I really realized was that because I'd been brought up, perhaps like you, to think that exercise was about competition, and I'm not competitive, or losing weight, I hadn't grasped all the other benefits of exercise. And when I did this big fundraising challenge for mum, I realized that exercise was so healing for my anxiety and just making me feel much better. And so then I just started doing lots of other things, going back in the sea, hiking, all these things that I had given up as a child, because for me, they weren't proper exercise. You know, I wasn't losing weight. I wasn't tracking it. And so I'd given up all this joy. So I brought all this exercise back into my life, but in terms of joy and anxiety, you know, help me sleep, help me relieve my anxiety, give me moments with other people out in nature. And then in September 2016, I took my first paddleboarding lesson. I'd injured my knee. It is funny how life, you know, deals us blows, and you then think, okay, how can I react to this? I'd injured my knee in January. I was starting to feel better. And so I took a paddleboarding lesson on Derwent Water. And the minute I stood up, Nikki, I said to myself, I feel like a warrior, not a worrier. And for the last 9 months, I've been on crutches and in pain. And suddenly I, you know, held my head high and thought, I love this. I love this. So yeah, that's the route it took.
That is amazing, Jo. What was it about that, do you think, rather than anything else, that you just took to immediately?
I think it was the water. I love water. I'd always wanted to be a surfer, but again, I had this thing in my head that I wasn't cool enough, I wasn't slim enough, I wasn't pretty enough. And also surfing is really a lot harder than paddleboarding. So I think it was the accessibility. I could do it quite quickly. Within a couple of hours, I was standing up. I love the water. I love the actual physical nature of paddleboarding, the standingness. You know, I love that. I think it gives you a real sense of, you kind of open up your chest, your leg, you're just standing and you're feeling really confident. And it felt like something that I could do quite quick. You know, I could just do it and then I could build upon it. And also, I think there was something about in 2016, not many people were doing it. And I quite like doing things. I'm a real conformist in many ways, but there's a tiny, tiny part of me that's a little bit of a rebel, a tiny part. And it's a bit like everybody else is doing other things. I'm going to do my thing. So I love that, the newness of it and the exploration and learning about it. So yeah, but I think that just the water massively helps me. Being out in nature is massively important to me.
It's so important, isn't it, for your mind, for your body, for your just sanity in general. So you started paddleboarding, and then what happened next? What what was the story between just doing a few lessons and doing this huge feat?
So that was September, and in about November, December, I decided that I wanted to paddleboard. So this is 2016. I wanted to paddleboard from Liverpool to Leeds on the Leeds-Liverpool Canal, which is 128 miles. And I had this plan, and I found some little posts on my phone where I got some little graphics about it, and I was really excited, and I thought, oh, this will be really fun. But I told a few people, and the response was, that sounds really complicated, that sounds really difficult, that sounds a bit boring, and definitely too difficult for a woman of your age. And I was literally only 51 coming to 52. And so I put the dream away. Like literally, I just went, oh yeah, maybe he's right. Okay, was it he? Maybe he's right. Maybe I can't do it. Maybe it's too big for me. Maybe I'm not good enough. But in the intervening 3 years, I lost a number of girlfriends, 5 in the space of 6 months. And 4 of them were cancer and 1 was a heart problem. And what I realized was that life, as we all know, particularly coming through the couple of years we've been through, is that life is really short and really precious. And if you have a dream, you should at least try and get yourself to the start of the dream And so I began to build up my confidence. A lot of the 3 years was building my confidence, and also coming through the menopause and realizing that I could do things about it, that I didn't have dementia because I had brain fog. I wasn't suffering some terrible disease. I was going through this transitional stage and I was finding my way through it. So my confidence grew, my menopause symptoms eased. And then 2019, I realized that my youngest son was going off to university. So I'd be like Joey, no mates at home, empty nester. And also that if you have a dream, you should just try and go for it. So January 2019, I decided, right, I'm going to paddleboard, bring back that dream, bring back that dream alive. But this time I was going to add an extra 34 miles and go from coast to coast, from Liverpool to Goole. And I just made that decision, like literally, I went, right, I'm just going to do it. And I don't care what anyone says. And I think that the menopause, I don't know if your clients feel this or you do, but the menopause broke me when I was already down. But in hindsight, it also remade me. I had to look at every aspect of my life, who I was, what I was doing, what I believed in. And also, I think being divorced also added to that too. I had to rebuild myself. And so I had to say to myself, just give yourself the chance and don't worry what other people think. And I think that's one of the massive benefits of becoming middle-aged, is you just care less what other people think. And so I literally did. And the same people would say, really? And you're going to go further this time? And I was like, yep. And nothing you are going to say is going to change my mind. And so, yeah, I set off July 2019 in the rain, in thunderstorms, to paddle across the country. So that's what happened.
That's incredible. I think when you get to that moment and you know this is something that you have to do and you don't care what anyone else thinks, well, you kind of do a little, don't you? But not listen to them and just follow your own path. It's really inspiring, Jo. It's really inspiring. And I know it took you a while to get there. So tell me a little bit about how long it took you and what obstacles, what challenges were brought up.
On the route, or in the 3 years on the route?
No, on the journey, on the paddleboard journey.
Yeah, so basically the weather wasn't great. It rained for 2 days. When I started out, I didn't think anybody would want to be part of it with me. So I booked accommodation along the way, and was going to take taxis from the canal to the accommodation. But then a filmmaker, Frick Tam, asked if they could join me. And so I had this companion for 8 of the 11 days, which made it a whole different experience. And obviously we made the film Brave Enough. I had moments of huge self-doubt. I remember one night, and I need my sleep. I have to go to bed at 10 o'clock. I don't care what is happening. I'm in bed, my bed blanket goes on at 9:30, and I get, nothing stops me from going to bed. I need my sleep. And one night, 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I was like, I don't know if I can do this. It had been a really hard day's paddling. There was a lot of weed, which really slowed me down. And I was just like, I don't know if I can do this. And a little tiny kind voice inside me said, take as long as you need to take, as long as you're not injured. You set yourself 10, 11 days. You can ask work for more time. They'll understand if you need to take an extra day. Just be kind to yourself and just paddle stroke by stroke. And so that, again, I think that's part of becoming middle-aged, and just being kinder to yourself. So I had weed, all the litter, the thunderstorms. A few people on the towpath would say things like, you should put an engine on that. Or they would say, how far have you come? And one day I said, about 80 miles. And the response was, in your dreams. And I was like, I have done this. This sense of other people not thinking I could do it. And that created both self-doubt, but also that tiny little rebel in me, which was like, well, I'm going to show you anyway, mate. And yeah, a lot of thunderstorms, a lot of self-belief. I had to really dig deep, but there was also so much joy, that I was finally living my dream. And it wasn't the dream that other people would have. Their dream might be to go on holiday in the sun. Mine was to attempt to do this, and to litter pick along the way, to fundraise, and to show that a 54-year-old woman could do something a bit unusual. And yeah, so I did it, and I ended in the thunderstorm. And for the first time, I think I was just so proud of myself that I set myself a goal, told people about it, with the risk of them knowing I might fail, and I did it anyway. I think that's just, again, another middle-aged joy, really.
It's just fabulous. And, you know, I'm really, really, really glad that you made the film, because, you know, having, you know, achieving what you did was amazing. But the film is actually going to inspire so many other people to try and go for their dreams as well. It won't, you know, it might not be paddleboarding,
Yeah,
or whatever you did, but it's the principle, isn't it, of really going for what you want in life and not letting anyone stop you. And the film is, I would highly recommend a watch. I'm going to put the link in under here, because it's a really, really beautiful film. It's very gentle. It really feels like I went on that journey with you, Jo. It was lovely. And there are moments in there that had me in absolute tears of it's very moving, especially at the end. And I'm not going to give you a spoiler for the end, but it is a lovely, lovely moment. And it really inspired me to do something a bit more brave with my life. And I'm sure that's what you wanted from that film and from the whole thing, really. Tell us a little bit about what you managed to achieve with the fundraising as well, because all the way through it, you were picking up litter like crazy, and I could not believe the rubbish that was on there. I think you said you could have filled up buckets and buckets and buckets.
Yeah, so I set myself, I'm an ambassador for the 2 Minute Beach Clean Foundation, and I set myself a goal that I would do some litter picking each day. I couldn't pick up everything, but it was just to show people what we found. And so we had a goal to raise money for 3 beach clean stations, which basically you put them by beaches or rivers or whatever, and encourage people to pick up litter. And we actually raised enough money for 4. I collaborated with a couple of people and we got 4. And the other project was the Wave Project, which is a surf therapy charity that harnesses the power of the ocean to help young people with their mental health. I set myself a goal of 1,000 and we almost reached 2,000. So we surpassed it. And they were tiny charities that at the time people didn't necessarily know that much about. And I was kind of sharing them with a different audience. And I was just really proud of what we achieved. I always say we, because it felt like very much a we along the whole thing. It's always been a we. I felt like people were with me by my side on the canal, and there were moments when I was tearful and when I made mistakes, and sharing that, you know, on my social media as I went along. I felt like people were there with me. I think teenage women have that real sense of sisterhood, and knowing you can look at a woman, I think, and sort of think, I kind of get what she's feeling right now, you know, looking a bit drawn or tearful. And a lot of people would message me and just say, you know, keep going, you can do it. And that really made a huge difference to me.
No, it was a really good watch. And then what have you done since then, in the last couple of years?
Yeah, so like a lot of people, I launched a podcast in lockdown. I launched a podcast about paddleboarding. So I interview women who paddleboard. And I've had like world record breakers and endurance athletes. But then I also interview women who maybe don't have the big titles around them, but they just have a really lovely story. So I don't know how you choose your guests, but my criteria are they love paddleboarding, they have an interesting story, and they have a generous heart. And every single guest has an interesting story and a generous heart. And my criteria is, if one woman listens to this, or one man, and feels encouraged to go paddleboarding, that's my criteria for success. And luckily it's been taken, you know, into people's hearts and they love it. I've written a book about paddleboarding. I'm a bit of a one-trick pony at the moment. Last year I went round the country and paddleboarding in 35 amazing places, and we're just doing the final edits to the book. So yeah, so film book. I feel like that game on the, you know, I just need an opera now or play or something. Yeah.
It's incredible. What an adventure though you've made your life now. I mean, describe the difference between that biscuit moment in the aisle to now, and the woman you are now.
Yeah, I think I'm the same woman. I think I'm very much the same woman, because I'm still anxious and I'm still a worrier and I still have bad sleepless nights sometimes. But what I've realized is that I have tools to help me. And one of those is obviously all the self-care around purpose and sleep and food and rest and stress. But also I understand myself better. And I know that I worry about things that I don't need to worry about. And that I then have to say to myself, look at all these things you've done, look, all this sort of difference you've made, you know, and I have to bring myself back round from that sort of deep despair of feeling I can't do something and that I'm not good enough, and say, look, you've done these things, you are good, you know. And again, I think that's the menopause. It broke me and then it made me remake myself. And so I have to draw upon those moments, like when I went across the finish line, like when people say they love the podcast, or yes, we'd like you to write a book. I have to draw upon those moments and remind myself, because it's so easy to get back into that anxiety spiral. And I like to be honest about that, because I don't want people to think, oh, she's sorted and she doesn't have any of those problems. I still have them. I still go into a real, oh my God, I can't do this. And have a sleepless night. And then I start doing it. And then I realize, oh my God, I can do it. You know, I'm terrible for that. I'm terrible for letting the fear of something procrastinate me. I don't know if that's a word. It makes me procrastinate. And then when I start, I really get into it.
Yeah.
So I'm the same woman, but I just feel like I have a well of joy and tools that I can draw upon when all those menopausal things come crashing down in my head, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. And I heard you talking recently about motivation for getting out and doing things. I'd love you to share what you said about that, because I really think that was really helpful.
Yeah, so I'm 57 now. Like, I went into lockdown at 54 and now I'm 57, and it feels to me like there's a bit of a jump there. You know, I'm looking at 60, not 50 anymore, and I'm closer to 70 than I am, you know, 40, I think. But you know what I mean? It just feels different. Yeah. And so when I move, it is all for my joy, but I also am very aware that really there is only one way my body is progressing, and that is to get older. And so what I need to do is not just for now, I need to look after the future me. And I want to look after the future me. And I know, looking at older women and men, you know, and I think, who are friends, and I think, yeah, you know, muscle strength, bone strength, heart health, all those things. I need to look after the Joe who is 60 and 70 and 80, if I'm lucky enough to get them. You know, none of us have a crystal ball. However many superfoods I might eat, you know, none of us have a crystal ball. So I want to look after her. So when I do things, that Joe of the future is in my mind. You know, I want to be paddleboarding in my 70s. I want to be bodyboarding. I want to go for long walks. So I need to do stuff today. And that motivation is self-care about the older Joe. So it is for today's joy, but it's also saying, you know, and I'm really bad at stretching. I do stuff and then I come home and then I'm on to something else. I never stretch. I never, you know, and I'm thinking I need to do more of that. I need to just take care of my muscles. I need to look after the future Joe, because if I want to do those things, I have to look after this body, you know. She needs that care. So yeah, that's very much my motivation. It's my motivation for today so that I sleep well and I'm jolly, but it's also my motivation for tomorrow. So yeah, there's two going on.
I absolutely love that. It's such a good way of thinking about it. It's not about, you know, your short-term gain. It's who you want to be in the future. Yeah.
I read a book called Playing Big, and it said, you know, imagine yourself in 15 years time. And I had this image, you know, that I want to be, you know, a woman that says, oh, you know, come to my house, come for tea, but you'll have to come after I've been, you know, bodyboarding, or, you know, and I want to feel relaxed about who I am and be out there doing things and volunteering and trying to make a difference. And I need the energy to do that. So yeah.
Oh no, that's brilliant. It's music to my ears as well. I'm very much on that page as well, Joe. Finally, just do any sort of last tips you have for those women listening who just don't feel like they've got what it takes to just get out there and do what they need to do.
I think one of the biggest things is put yourself on the priority list, because we didn't grow up with that. We grew up looking after everybody, you know, and I even remember, you know, people saying that, oh, well, you know, as a wife, you need to put everybody else, you know, people literally said it. And so I believed it, that putting myself on the priority list was selfish, and it's so not. And I think there is sometimes a message around self-care now, which is, it's not selfish because it'll make you a better mother, daughter, wife, friend, whatever. But actually, that's only half the story. I think you should look after yourself for you. and not just because it'll make you in better service to other people, but for you, you know. So put yourself on the priority list, look after you, make time for you. And I always say, start where you are, start with what you've got, start today and start small. So literally, and I know what it's like when you've not slept well, and the idea of going out and doing any form of exercise is just horrendous. I know that. You know, I had a few weeks ago, I had a bit of a worry time. So I had a couple of really bad nights sleep, and I was just like, oh, all that worry came back about something. And it feels awful. And I just say, just go for 5 minutes. And if after 5 minutes you want to come home, fine. If after 10 minutes you want to keep staying out for a walk, fine. So always just, and fit it into your, you know, try and fit it into your life, but make time for you and know it's about doing it for you. So put yourself on the priority list, start small, start where you are, start with what you've got, you know, and also start today, but also build a community. I think that's why your podcast is so good, because you're building a community of people that when people listen in, they think, I'm not alone. I think the menopause can make you, it's like depression. It can make you feel very isolated, very alone, like everybody else's life is sorted and you're the one crying in the supermarket and nobody understands. And actually, I think in every supermarket, there'll be a lot of women there going, I know exactly how you're feeling. So if you build a community around you, either virtually through podcasts or on social media, you've got people there that are cheering you on. Or, you know, now everything's opening up, go to a gym or a running club, or just build a community around you to know that you're not alone. I think for me, that's hugely important. And you're enough, you are literally enough. And that's just a message that I just want to share with everybody. You know, everybody is enough.
Everyone's enough. Oh, what a beautiful place to end, Jo. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I know you will have inspired a huge amount of people, as you already have done. And I urge everybody to watch the film. It's a lovely watch, and listen to your podcast. And thank you so much for joining me. It's been amazing.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Nikki.